Hello, Crazy Cats. Mike from the WCA. I'd like to take a look at a gameplay between Christopher and Ashwin from this last Sunday. We're going to be looking at your games more and more as time goes on. I'm very impressed. I'm really happy with the progress so far. The games have been really good. The tournament experiences have been even better. That's what we're looking for. We know that a lot of you guys are going to come into class having tough tournaments, having great tournaments, and that's the kind of stuff that we want to go through. And hopefully soon we're going to start showing some of your tournament games here. All right. The reason I'm showing this game is I'm trying to address one of the problems that we're having in class, and that's when with the black pieces or with white, but mostly with black, we're not fighting for the center with pawns, which is okay at the master level or expert level or grandmaster level. But as new and improving players, I highly recommend you put a pawn in the middle with black on your first move, just until you get yourself ready to play different types of openings. And here's why. So Chris opens up with e4 here, you see? And when you start taking over squares with pawns, it means the power pieces up here can't go wherever they want. So what Ashwin did here, and I like the way he plays. The week before he played a terrific game against Mihiro. But the thing is, he has to be very careful that his minor pieces don't get kicked around. So he played b6. Some people call this the Owens defense. It goes by some other names, but you don't need to know any of those names. Just think about why Ashwin is playing b6 on move 1, and it's because he wants to probably fianchetto this bishop. And when that bishop comes to b7, it's going to be very powerful on that diagonal. Now, controlling the center with pieces from the side is a terrific way to play, but it does take on a little bit of risk in that Christopher's pawn can advance into black's territory very easily. I wouldn't do it now, but I definitely would do it if I could kick a knight away, as you're going to see something that could have happened in the game. All right, let's go a little bit deeper. So Christopher plays classically. He just develops two pawns or puts them in the middle. Ashwin plays knight f6, and here's an odd move. Christopher plays knight f3, and if he wants, Ashwin can simply take the pawn. Now, Christopher did this to me a couple of weeks ago, and I'm not sure if he had an answer to this move. And it's funny, when I looked this up, I couldn't find any master games, but other people were looking at this up in the cloud. So hopefully you know what that means. They're not really on clouds. But in the internet, there were players who were looking at this for white, sacrificing a pawn. So if, if this knight moves away, does white have compensation for a pawn? Well, they're going to, because, they could castle, and black doesn't have all that much out yet at this point. But to Ashwin's credit, he doesn't go pawn hunting. He plays g6. And here's where, as I mentioned in the introduction, I'm a little concerned with the way he's playing. He is going to get both bishops to active diagonals, but I don't think he has enough presence in the center with his pawns. So Chris just keeps playing classical chess, developing his knights, protecting the two center pawns, bishop g7 like we talked about, bishop to c4. Now, those of you who play the four knights opening, even though this is not a king's pawn opening, you may be sharp enough to recognize that Ashwin could play a center fork trick here. There is a little bit of a difference than the regular king pawn openings. So if he goes for this and Chris takes back, so you can pause your video if you want to see how black gets his piece back, but hopefully you found the move d5, bishop to d3, say takes and takes. And the reason why this is a little bit better for white than the normal center fork trick is because this bishop is attacking that rook in the corner, and the only real way to protect it is you'd have to move a pawn to c6, and you'll see that the black pieces up here are kind of stuck a little bit, and this pawn's hanging around on c6, and you have to keep an eye on it. So I don't think this is a terrific way for black to play. So he could have gone for that, but he wisely chose not to, and instead he castled. Okay, all good so far. Chris castles. Again, every single move he's playing has seems to have an opening purpose. We have the minor pieces coming out, use of the center pawns, king castled. Ashwin is playing a different style of chess. There's nothing wrong with it. It's kind of interesting. He's saying, hey, you know, I don't have to control the center with pawns. I can do it with my pieces. And I have news for you. There's a lot of grandmasters who play that way. Again, my preference for you birds is I would prefer you get a pawn in the middle at some point just to stake out a little bit of space for yourself. All right? Knight c6. And, you know, these pawns in the middle are just begging to be pushed. You know, if you play pawn e5, for example, where does that horse go? It's probably going to have to go back to e8. And, you know, black's getting smushed. He's getting pushed back. And I don't like to see young players play positions where they're being squeezed. It's like, I don't have any room for my pieces, man, you know? So after e5, moves like knight h5 can get you in big trouble. So let me highlight this knight, turn a light on him. He's a little shy, but I'll put the spotlight on him anyway. Why did I highlight him? That should look funny to you. If you're playing in a tournament game and your opponent puts a knight on the side of the board like that, always ask yourself, can the knight move again? And I know that sounds strange, but remember, he can't move off the board. That's illegal. So if all the squares on this side are taken, the knight's in trouble. I mean, he can't jump on the bishop's head. He could come into f4, but he'll get captured by this bishop down here on c1. So where's the knight going to go if you attack it? The knight is lost. True that Christopher would weaken his king's position, but it's clearly worth it because you're going to win a whole piece, and black doesn't really have anything that can come out and attack this king. So again, I hope you guys are remembering the ideas. You see a knight on the edge of the board, it doesn't mean it's bad, it doesn't mean it's good, but it should make you open your eyes, okay? So back here after knight c6, I thought, Chris, it was time to maybe push one of these pawns and make Ashwin a little uncomfortable. You know, let's kick those knights around. But what did he do instead? It looks like he's going to grow up to be a real classical player. Bishop f4. Every piece, every move, everything he's doing is about development. So it's a very impressive display here going on. Okay, so Ashwin continues with his development. And now Chris plays queen d3. Queen d3 is okay. I didn't have a chance to ask him if he did that just to connect the rooks or not. But, you know, what is the main reason for queen d3? Not really sure. He's protecting his center. He did, however, connect his rooks, which is something we're learning to do. And then Ashwin plays rook c8. Rook c8, not quite sure what's happening there. Maybe he was planning on moving his queen somewhere. That could be possible. And he didn't want this bishop to take the pawn. But you see, hopefully you guys understand what happens when you let your opponent build this huge mass in the center. I mean, if I said to you, who's controlling the center, black or white? It's like, huh? It's like totally white. And because white is controlling all of these squares on the 5th rank, where are the black pieces going to go? So again, I keep using the word squeezed. Ashwin's getting pushed back. So again, he could push these pawns forward, but rook a to d1 was played. I'm impressed here because while I think he should push the pawns, what he's doing instead is he's completely activating everything he has. And if you see grandmaster games, you'll see that technique being used. If they're not sure what to do, they centralize a piece. You know, back here, this rook on a1 is guarding the a pawn. So what does he do? He plays rook a to d1, centralizing the piece. So when these files open, this rook is going to be ready for action. And that's exactly what happened in this game. Okay, pawn to e6, kind of shutting down the diagonal and preparing d5. Rook f to e1. He just keeps continuing building his center. It's kind of funny. It's like he has so much of the center that he just keeps wanting more, which is okay. But at some point, you want to cash in. And that expression to cash in means, you know, you have a great center, use it for something. Chase a knight away. I don't know, attack Josh. Who's the real Josh? Nobody knows. And by the way, you don't even know what Chris this is. We have 3 Chris's at the WCA. So maybe I'll show a picture of who this Chris is, because last week it was a different Chris. Or was it? I'm getting confused. Anyway, black to play. Rook e8. Kind of sitting back, but I feel a storm coming. All right, now at this point, Chris ran out of opening ideas. He castled, he used every minor piece, he controlled the center, he centralized his rooks, so now it's time to start doing something. So he finds a pin. He plays bishop to g5, which is annoying, because this knight now could get kicked with this pawn at some point, and that could be a real problem if the knight is pinned to Big Mama. So to Ashwin's credit, he plays pawn h6. Now Chris could keep the pin, which is perfectly fine, but he chose to take the knight instead, luring the bishop out, and now the bishop gets hit with e5. So it worked out similarly, but I think it would have been a little more effective had he kicked the knight out. Bishop retreats, and I like his move a lot. d5. d5, really opening up the game and trying to give Ashwin some trouble while he's not as well developed. Now here, I think Ashwin missed a chance to do something with this knight that's being attacked that could become useful. There's a lot of pressure on d5. You can see that if this knight were not here, let me just rest it on the queen's head for now. Hey, oh, come on, don't complain. You're a queen after all. You see, if I move this knight out of the way, that this bishop is influencing or attacking this square. What if I move the knight here to b4, which was an option that Ashwin had? Because if he can play knight b4, he's not only winning a tempo against the queen. Let's move her, I don't know, let's say queen e2. A little scary to line up with this rook, but maybe not the end of the world. At least the knight that was attacked here can fight for this square. Just take it. Take it. You got rid of a problem. You had a knight that was being attacked, and you start to take down Chris's center, which, by the way, is the whole idea of playing, giving your opponent the full center, and then after a little bit of time, go attack it. So Ashwin, believe me, he's played this before. So it's not like, this is his first time just winging it. He's not. He has an idea of what he's doing. The week before against Mahiro, very impressive. Mahiro found out his real rating. He almost fell off the chair. So let's say you have a couple of captures now in this square. I'm not saying all these trades have to happen, but all of a sudden, from a very quiet position for black, you play a move like d6 here, and the game starts to become equal, chances for both sides. Let me turn on the lights. Oh my goodness. Look at these things. First, let's talk about the two minor pieces that might be left. You have a knight for white, a bishop for black. Just because black has a bishop and white has a knight, it doesn't mean one has the advantage. But if you look in the future, if these center pawns disappear, and it appears to me that there's an excellent chance they will someday, when you play a position with a minor piece like a knight that doesn't have any central pawns, where does the knight sit comfortably? Notice I said comfortably, because without center pawns to protect the knights, I mean, they can go into the middle, but if they're not supported by pawns, then you have to babysit them. The cool thing about bishops, if this pawn disappears and this pawn disappears and this diagonal opens, the bishop can stay right where he is and attack the other side of the board. Another thing you grandmasters will notice, there are pawns on both sides of the board. When that happens, generally the knight is kind of in second place. The bishop kind of takes over because he can get to both sides of the board much faster than the knight. The knight would really love to have a pawn to support him. Now, this is not the game continuation, but I hope you're learning something by what I'm offering from just going over some lines that could have happened, okay? So a couple of other explanations. So you see the long diagonal arrow I made. I've already talked about the knight and the bishop. There is some pressure on this line, so black obviously has to be careful, not to take this pawn and hang the queen in one move. Black also has a problem with this rook on c8. It's clearly the worst piece on the board right now. You're going to need to improve that at some point. But at least black has options now to break out of that bind that Christopher put on him. So I think going back, I hope that's clear. Does anyone have any questions? Just raise your hand. No? Excellent. Good. Yes, I can see you all. So going back here after this capture here, right here, I'm sorry, this knight was being attacked, and again I recommend that the move knight b4 be played. I think that would have given him more play. So instead, after d5, Ashwin takes. And then a funny sequence happened here where he lost the piece. He could have lost a lot more, but let me show you what happened. Chris takes with his bishop, and I think what Ashwin missed, and believe it or not, so did Chris, is that when you take with that bishop, you guys see that diagonal? That F pawn is pinned, which makes this pawn a target. Because if this pawn gets captured by anything, I don't know, an octopus, a knight, a bishop. Now I said an octopus. Well, there is an octopus staring right at that pawn. Why do we call queens an octopus? Because she can move in 8 directions. That queen is attacking an undefended pawn. So what happened in the game is Ashwin blundered here. He took on e5 with his bishop, not realizing that after this sequence of trades you're about to see, he's going to lose material. But Chris missed an opportunity to win very quickly. So you can stop the video if you want and work it out for yourself, but it's not that hard. Queen takes g6. It might not be easy to see the first move, but once you see it, black is in big trouble. If you move your king, to like h8, then you lose this pawn check. King goes to g8. How about a move like rook e4? This is not going to be an easy check to stop. This is not pleasant at all. After queen g6, you're probably going to just have to move your bishop to block that, because after the check, you probably don't want to play king f8 because you get mated in one move, all right? So queen g6, bishop g7, bishop takes check, ouchie. This is not going to end pretty. King goes to f8. Thank you for the rook check. Queen takes, forced. Thank you for the queen. Rook takes, and this is totally winning for white. Even I could win this game. All right, so Ashwin, bishop takes e5, big no-no. Chris, taking with the knight turned out well, but it would have been much better taking the pawn on g6. Okay, knight takes, rook takes, and he's going to be down a piece here. If the rook were to take, same trick, guys. Queen takes g6, and all the fun starts again. This is not going to be pretty. All sorts of things are hanging. So I think Ashwin saw that and played this instead. He took the bishop on d5, and now the game pretty much ends. Queen took, pawn c6, and this is like a Paul Morphy move. Kind of rude. He could trade rooks here, check, and then win a pawn, but instead he plays queen d6, which is just embarrassing this pawn so much on d7. It can't move. And if it can't move, like nothing up here can move, and he has an extra knight. It's like, oh, so rude. So to try to relieve that pressure, he trades off a pair of rooks. But remember, every trade that he makes is helping Chris because he's up a whole knight. Pawn d6 hitting the queen, and Chris just takes it. And queen c7. And I like the way Chris just sits on these squares. He just sinks his pieces in. And I'm going to end the video here because he's down a knight, and it didn't end well for him. But although I really like Ashwin's style. Grandmasters, if you need to watch this in 2 parts, and I'll write that in the introduction, do it. But please make sure that you remember the ideas from the game, not the individual moves, just the ideas, okay? You guys are the best. We'll see you on Sunday.